Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's information for differentiated instruction. I'm going to talk a little bit about chapters 4 and 5 today, and then the second student outcome piece that you guys have to work on. This one should be, it's the same concept as student outcome 1, but we're looking at proficiency and assessing students' learning style and preferences. Okay, so this covers parts of chapters 3 and 4 of the textbook. The same option as we had before here. Here are some of the resources that you can use to help guide you, as well as chapters 3 and 4 that we have covered or will cover in the textbook about how you assess students' learning styles and preferences. Okay, so tell me how you do that in a paper. Demonstrate how you do that in a lesson plan. Do a speech or a video in regards to how you go about doing that. So these are extra files here that you can use. Also, please remember under the resources tab, as you go down here a little farther, outcome 2, okay, proficiency. So we're looking at assessing students' learning styles and preferences. How do you do that? What are some ways to do that? Show me, demonstrate to me that you know how to do that. Now, there's a couple of videos in here as well as some examples. Learning style inventory here, for example. Here's a quick quiz that you can do. For example, to do a learning inventory style on yourself, answer the questions, it gives you the results at the end. Okay, so that's one way to go about doing that. Here's some multiple intelligence activities and examples that you can use in the classroom. I believe you are aware and understand and know, maybe not understand, but know about the different learning styles. Again, some videos with that. Here are some activities you can do in regards to the verbal linguistic. So this is a good site here for different types of activities. Strategies to use in terms of when you're teaching, different ways to teach to students with these learning styles. Now, another option that you have here for outcome 2 that you didn't have for outcome 1 is this IRIS website and this IRIS model. So this is a module that you can go through. Okay, and so this is the beginning of the module here. Okay, and so what you would do is go through these different tabs here on the side, right? So here we're looking about differentiated instruction, maximizing the learning of all students. Okay, so as you go through here and look at this, oh yeah, this, okay, cool, this is great. This is what it's about. Next thing, you go to the challenge. Okay, and so you just can work your way through each of these different components. Here the video goes through, it talks a little bit about differentiated instruction. You can go to the next piece here. You don't have to jot down your initial thoughts, but here it kind of gets you started thinking about what is it, how do teachers do it, so on and so forth. So as you think about it a little bit, you go to the next part here. As you complete this part here, et cetera, these are the different standards. When you're ready to go to proceed to page 1. So you can go through these different parts here, and it will help you through and give you some information in regards to differentiated instruction. Carol Tomlinson, which is the author of our book that we're using for differentiated instruction. So as you're going through, let me see if I can close this up here. Okay, so these are the different parts. Anyway, when you get through this whole thing, at the very end, there's an assessment component of that you can use. If you answer these questions, okay, in here, you can use this as your your demonstration, or you can hand that responses to these questions in to fulfill your assignment for this this objective or this outcome number 2. Okay, so you have the option of doing this module if you want, answering those questions and uploading the answers to those questions in the assignment tab, coursework tab, and that will suffice for completing student outcome 2. Okay, so you have that option for this one in that IRIS iris section or iris component. Okay, and you can also do it the way you have previously done it, or you did for the last one too. You can write a paper, do a PowerPoint, lesson plan, do a video, whatever you want to do with that. But that's totally up to you. Okay, so chapters 4 and 5 quiz. I'm going to talk about chapters 4 and 5 a little bit here, and then the student outcome 2 are the assignments for this week. Okay, please remember that I have due dates for these, but if the due date passes, it will stay open. So if you are struggling with something, have questions, not sure, please reach out and ask me. If you got something else that has come up, or you're working on something for the other class or Travis's class, you know, please be aware that you have some extension or some times on that. But I would recommend not letting things go too long before you turn them in. Okay, this is a short, summer session, and you have 2 pretty intense classes, or maybe not necessarily intense, but probably a fair amount of work for both of these classes. But it will only last for another month, okay, approximately, and then things will lighten up or shift a little bit to where you'll have just one class and then be working hopefully a little bit more on your thesis or your project with your advisor. Okay, so it'll be probably a tough month, but also know that it is only another 5 weeks maybe that this will last. Okay, so if you can buckle down, set aside time, and make sure that you're focused for this 5 weeks, then things will be okay. I promise you. Okay. All right, so if we take a look at chapter 4 and some of the highlights of that chapter, if I find it as I go to the beginning. So learning environments that support differentiated instruction. So think of the environment, whether it's the classroom environment, the school environment. Think of your environment at work. If you don't work in a school or in a classroom, or places you've worked before, think of how that environment makes it enjoyable, makes it good, or makes it better to come to work or to stay at work there. So that learning environment makes a big difference, not just for differentiated instruction, but for a lot of things in regards to student performance or employee performance, for example. Okay, so think of this teaching component and differentiated instruction as a learning triangle, equilateral triangle. So us as the teacher, and then the students or the kids, and then the content at each corner. Okay, the teacher is on top, the students and the content then also are on each side. And if one goes unattended or you don't really pay attention to one, then it gets out of balance, right? And things can get difficult with the other components in there, whether it's teaching, whether it's content, and whether it's the students. Okay, so if we continue to look at that as a triangle, we have to embrace classroom leadership and responsibility as that teacher. Okay, so obviously we're going to be at the top, right, as the leader. Okay, but what does that leadership look like? Okay, we don't necessarily want it to be like a dictatorship, for example, where we're making all the decisions. We make all the choices. Students, nothing changes. This is how we do it. Straight, narrow path. Nothing branching off, nothing shifting. We want to be careful that we don't necessarily do it that way. We have to share some responsibility with the student, some decision making with the student. Okay, so but we have to be confident in ourselves in terms of what we're doing, and also be confident that if we make a mistake or we don't know something, or a student brings up a question, challenges us, that's okay. And that if we don't know the answer, we can shift, we can work to help find the answer, work with the students to come up with a solution and come up with an answer, because that's what teaching is all about. It's a little bit of giving and learning. We don't have to know everything as the teacher or even the leader in certain situations, certain content. We have to be flexible and confident enough that we can find out the answer. We can find a solution if we need to. Okay. Right here, a secure teacher is not concerned about being right, but rather being open to find information, to hear others, to take suggestions. Okay, so please be aware. I think of that. It's difficult for some people that they have to be right. Okay, they have to be if they're not right, if they don't have all the answers, they're seen as a failure or seen as, somebody, oh, I'm not doing my job. Don't feel that way. Okay. Secure teachers control the climate in the classroom by how they approach the students, the climate of the classroom, climate of the work area. What's that like? If someone's constantly hollering, someone's, don't make any noise, don't distract me, those people can feel very, feel very worried, I guess, or scared to make a mistake, for example. So a secure teacher's primary goal should be to develop students' capacity to take control of their own lives and learning. Okay, not someone else telling them what to do, not someone else telling them how to do it, but at some point, students taking over ownership of their learning and of what's going on in their lives, right? So the students, okay, then attending to their differences and opportunities. Okay? So each kid is like all others, but also different than all others. Kids need unconditional acceptance as humans, believe they can become better than they are today, help in living up to dreams, make their own sense of things, mire effectively and coherently when adults collaborate with them, need action, joy, and peace, power over their lives and learning, help to develop the power and use it wisely, need to be secure in a larger world. So not all kids, understand that not all kids have these abilities, right? They probably have a need, but some of them don't know how to do some of these things. Okay, that's why we need to help them or teach them some of these components as well. We don't just teach content, or we don't, even as a leader, or a supervisor or a boss, sometimes we need to help people along in different areas. I would say that a lot of people also need help, or they have these needs as well, right? To understand, to make their own sense, to have action, joy, peace. Everybody wants and needs most of these things, but some people need help in achieving them, understanding them, or seeing them. Okay, so that's the students, what the students needs, their responsibilities. We also need to help them through that process, or to get to some of those points as well. Now, the last triangle component is the content. Okay, making it compelling for all learners. Okay, so in a healthy classroom, what is taught and learned is relevant to the students. You probably heard this 1,000 times before, right? Relevant to the students, it's personal, familiar, connected to the things that they know. Help students understand themselves and their world more fully now and as they continue to grow. Authentic, offering real history, math, art, not just exercises about the subject. So when we talk about real or authentic math, for example, that might be like word problems, for example, and problems that they might have to figure out, work on for things happening in the community or in their state or in the country. So that could be a connection to that math component. Can be used immediately for something that matters, and this often is open students' ideas to the power and potential both inside the classroom and out. So the content is, as we've talked about before, and you probably have heard before, authentic, connected to what they maybe are interested in, and can be used or evaluated, assessed, right away. So, that's the variable piece a lot in this differentiated instruction component, is the content for the students. Okay. Characteristics of a healthy classroom environment. So the teacher appreciates each child as an individual. Again, not that we're making lesson plans and everything for each individual student, but we have to recognize them and know that every student, every child has differences, maybe learns differently. And so we want to recognize that and appreciate that. So teachers in a healthy classroom take the risk of allowing their students to know them as people. So that's, again, something that depending on your comfort level, how much personal information you share with students. Okay, maybe information about your family, things you like to do, where you're at. When students see you out and about or at their activities or events, things like that outside the classroom, that helps to build that healthy classroom environment, because then students and even families see you more than just their classroom. okay, or their classroom teacher, for example. Okay. Teacher remembers to teach the whole child, and again, not just the content, but also the social, emotional things that are needed, life skills, all those components. So sometimes you have to address and teach those things first before you can start that content component, because without that, students may not learn at all. Okay, so you want to make sure that is addressed. As teachers, you want to continue to develop your expertise in the content area as well as instruction. That's why some of you are taking a master's or working on your master's program. Okay, teacher links students and ideas together. The teacher strives for joyful learning, right? We all probably remember our own teachers that we've had, that the more excited they were, happy, joking a little bit, the more we probably enjoyed that classroom than someone who might be crabby, upset, tired, just the same stuff over and over all the time in the classroom. Okay, so being a joyful learner, okay, and instructor is a big part of that healthy classroom environment for differentiated instruction. Okay. Set high expectations and provide lots of ladders. So we want to keep our expectations of our students up here and high, right? Some students will reach them easily, and we might have to adjust, right? Not every student might reach that super high expectation that we have. We have students that are really struggling way below grade level. We don't want to lower those expectations way down. We may bring them down a touch, right? But we're not going to drop them so low that it's so easy for them to read that, okay, or achieve that. But we are going to provide lots of ladders, strategies, support, scaffolding, all those components to help them, for students that are far behind, grow as much as they can to try to reach that high expectation. Okay, so we keep our high expectations up here, but we can also set smaller achievable goals for the student to work through to that high expectation. So don't drop those expectations and make them super, super low. Okay. We're going to help students make sense of their own ideas. Okay. Discovery, learning, questioning, all those components. We give them the sense that their ideas are okay, and how we can incorporate that into what we're doing, what we're teaching, what we're learning. We share teaching with students, okay, so allow them some opportunities, some ways to present information, share information, teach the others in their classroom, okay? So if we just minimize our assessments to one single thing, right, a test, a quiz, we may not provide some students the opportunity to share out information or demonstrate understanding of knowledge in a way that they know how to do that. Okay, so having some authentic assessments, a variety of assessments in different ways for students to present information, super important part of differentiated instruction. Okay, and student independence, of course, we definitely want to promote that as much as possible. And then also positive classroom management. Okay, so we're obviously going to have some classroom management issues and classroom management struggles as teachers, but how are we going to react to behaviors in our classroom? What is our policy within the school system setting in terms of working with challenging behaviors? Okay, we want to follow those policies, but yet how we react, how we handle what we do in our classroom is also very important. Okay, so make sure we're thinking about that, working on that. Classroom management is one of the most difficult pieces in teaching to perfect. I don't know if it's ever perfected, because there's always going to be different situations that come up, and they might be handled a little bit differently for some students. So we have to be aware of that. Okay, chapter 5, curriculum. Okay, good curriculum as a basis for differentiation. Now, if you remember, content, process, and product, the three big things that we talk about in differentiated instruction that we can change and shift. So content is our curriculum, right? Hazy lessons it talks about here right away. So talks about here, we may have entered teaching with a vague sense that students should read, listen, or watch something, then do a short activity. There is not always clarity here in what students should do and what teachers and students should learn. Sorry, that is not written very well in that. But when we lack clarity as teachers, our learning tasks we create may or may not be engaging, may not help students with ideas. So in differentiated instruction, students need to gain the same knowledge, but their approaches to learning it will be different, okay? So you're gonna have the same content, the same information, but how students go about understanding it, learning it, and then presenting it to us might be different. So we wanna be careful of those hazy lessons, okay? Engagement and understanding are required for great classroom instruction, great classroom management, get great classroom atmosphere, okay? When you have those two pieces together, students are engaged, they're involved, they're starting to understand the material, things will be going well, okay? So if you have things planned and then those aren't happening, it's okay to, take a pause. Maybe it's after that day's lesson, take a pause, reflect, change some things, whatever it might be, whatever you need to do to shift that or change that. It's okay to make that change. Okay, you don't have to do it in the middle of a lesson. Sometimes things just don't go right. Sometimes things don't go like we thought they would, right? And that's okay. Everything doesn't have to be perfect in the classroom all the time. That's why we shift. That's why we change. That's why we modify things. Okay. So in order for us to know if a student understands something, they can do all of the following things, right? Use it, explain it, compare and contrast, relate it to other things, transfer it to something unfamiliar, pose new problems, create analogies, models, all these different components. So it doesn't have to be just that they can regurgitate it back on a test. If they can explain it to you clearly, boom, you know that they have it, right? What if questions, okay, those are great, okay? There's also different levels of learning. Learning has, whatever this is here, learning has several dimensions, okay? We can learn facts and bits of information that we believe to be true, regurgitate it, that we can understand concepts, develop concepts, understand principles. So when we talk about these concepts and principles, that's a big idea, okay, a larger idea component in terms of a level of learning, right? And so the facts are the ones that are sometimes the smaller bits, pieces, chunks of information that we learn, we have to memorize. Excuse me. So we have full, whole, and rich learning environments at all levels of learning, at the very beginning or basic, as well as the very complex levels of learning as well. So facts without concepts and principles to promote meaning are ephemeral. I don't know what that means, sorry. Meaning without skills need to translate into actions, loses its potency. Positive attitudes about the magic of learning are stillborn until we know, understand, and can take action in our world, right? So if we're teaching a concept, a topic, some facts, without connecting it to something else that might be, students might use it, or they might understand why we're learning it, then sometimes, or a lot of times, it's just kind of like, why do we need to know this? Why is this important, right? So we have to try to, connect that as much as we can. And it's going to be different depending upon the student's ability level and their readiness level as well. And especially if we're talking about complex subjects and content as well. We have to think about skills, right? Skills can be generic or very subject specific. If we think about math, for example, that we use a lot, the conversion of fractions or converting decimals to fractions or fractions, those types of things, that's very subject specific. Where if we talk about, reading or fluency or understanding word vocabularies, those types of things can be very generic, because we're going to use reading and fluency in all subjects. So we have to understand that, piece of that as well. So while planning, we should generate specific lists of what students should know, understand, and be able to do by the time the unit ends. So those are a little bit of our standards, right, that we're looking at in education and in regards to content. So we always want to have things that students know. So our content standards, as well as the objectives of what we want the students to be able to do. Standards should be a vehicle to ensure that students learn more coherently, deeply, broadly, and durably. So that's why we have the state standards, right? Or the states have standards this is what students should know by the time they finish whatever grade level, whatever subject. It's a guideline for us. Okay, so we want to definitely teach those standards, but how we go about doing that, how deeply we want to go into those components, that can be up to us as instructors. Okay, but standards are an important part of the curriculum. Okay, but is not the curriculum. The curriculum is what we use to teach those standards and the ways we go about doing that. Okay, so to ensure effective teaching and learning, teachers need to link tightly 3 key classroom elements involved in learning, which I said: content, process, and product. Okay, those are the 3 important components. We can also, content is very connected to curriculum, right? But we can also connect the process and the product to that as well. Okay, how students make sense of the product and how they show or demonstrate they understand the information. Okay. So look at page 75 also to review that in terms of different learning levels and curriculum. But when we're talking about that, we need to make sure and make certain that to build activity, we want to build activity so that the content, the process, and the product incorporate materials and experiences that will lead to students to being engaged. Okay, so when we work on differentiating something, we may differentiate the curriculum or the content, right? But we probably will also do the process and the product with around that content as well. Okay, so we have to be ready and to make some of those changes and differentiate all 3 levels during a lesson potentially. Okay. So we're looking at a cycle here, a sensible cycle in teaching in terms of curriculum assessment and instruction. Clear goals is important. We go back to that murky or that I can't remember the name of that I used, the hazy lessons at the beginning. We want to be sure that we have clear goals for our lesson or our unit of study. What plans we're going to have to help students master those goals, where students are at relative to these goals prior to the beginning of instruction. So a pre-test, questions, conversation, discussion, all those components can help to see where students are at. Adapt tentative plans based on what is learned about students' needs. So we might change some of that. All of a sudden we find out that students know a lot, or all of a sudden we find out that they don't know very much. We might need to change that. Check to determine students' grasp of the content in the first segment. Adapt the plans, continue through that cycle. Okay, so to have an effective differentiated instruction depends on teacher and student clarity about what students know, what they understand, and what they will be able to do as a result of any learning. The teacher and student has clarity about where the student is at relative to those goals at a given time during the lesson. And the teacher's acceptance of responsibility to ensure that subsequent segments of learning deal directly with student gaps in learning, misunderstanding, advanced mastery, so on and so forth. Okay, so all these components will promote significant growth and development in that content and in that lesson, whatever it is that you might be teaching. Okay, so fundamentally, differentiated instruction is that instructional model that focuses on how teachers teach and how students learn in a classroom, and not necessarily the what that is the curriculum. Okay, so we are, when we think of the curriculum, it should not be thought of as a document or program teachers teach, but rather starting point for helping learners to make sense of the meaning of the world or the content or the information that they are working on. Okay, so again, the curriculum is having that good curriculum. That information is that good foundation of that beginning point for differentiation. Okay, so here's the material that needs to be learned. Here's the standards that we need to teach to. Now, what are we going to do? How are we going to differentiate that? How are we going to make it clear and understandable for the students so that they know a pathway forward to understanding? Okay, so if you have questions on chapters 4 or 5, please reach out and let me know. Once again, you have the opportunity, do the quiz for that chapter, chapters 4 and 5, but then also remember you have all these resources in here that you can use. for outcome number 2. And you can also do this IRIS module to help and answer those questions and upload the answers to those questions for your to provide, what's the word I'm looking for? Is it Monday? Sure feels like Monday. To provide an answer, to provide a document, to be successful in showing mastery or proficiency for outcome number 2. Just please call or email or text me if you have questions, and I will help you through it. Okay, take care. We'll see you next week on Monday, 6 p.m. on what day is that? June 6th, Monday, June 6th, 6 p.m. We will see you then for class. Take care. Let me know if you have questions.